1. So this is a story that I have not told a lot of people in my life, but it's something that I will never forget. When I was about 13, I lived in a house that was over 100 years old at the time, and we always knew that there was some type of spiritual activity in the house. My little brother claimed to hear a child crying in the basement, and my sister said there was an old lady in a rocking chair next to her bed that she saw late at night. The old lady wasn't hostile or anything, probably just the spirit of the old lady that passed away in the house a few years back, before we moved in, according to what we researched on the house. About a year before this incident happened, my sister and her friends were messing around with a Ouija board. And safe to say, some crazy things happened that night that I'd rather not talk about. So fast forward about a year, to, like I said, about 13 years old. Something that was the beginning of a month-long nightmare for myself. I can never explain this situation at all, but here it goes. So I was laying in my bed. It's early evening, so it was still light outside, and I was just listening to my radio. I was not dozing off, I was wide awake, and I'm just, listening to music and enjoying myself, enjoying the quiet in my own room. And all of a sudden, something grabbed my ankle and started to pull me towards the foot of the bed. I yanked my foot away, and whatever it was released its grip on me. I froze for a few seconds, trying to comprehend what just happened. And then I went to the foot of the bed and looked under the sheets, looked under the bed, looked everywhere, to make sure that my little brother didn't try to pull a prank on me or something. And there was nothing there. So I brushed it off as it was maybe my imagination or something. I don't know. So within 2 to 3 days after the incident, I started getting strange dreams of a face. Not the whole face, just the eyes. And its eyes were closed and I couldn't tell what it was, but I'd wake up sweating and I wasn't sure why. Then a few days after that, the eyes opened, and they were red and yellow, evil-looking eyes, and I would wake up shaking and sweating even more than before. A few days after that, the dreams escalated. I actually got a full look at the face of what has been staring at me for the past week, and it was utterly terrifying. The skin on this thing's face was dark blood red and veiny, and the eyes were yellow laced with red in the irises. It just stared at me, and I can't even tell you how long it was staring at me for. Then I would wake up screaming because of this. Then a few days after that, the face started smiling at me. I can't even begin to describe the amount of pure terror that I felt. It was just staring and smiling at me with sharp white teeth. A few days after that started, then I would picture it on what looked like an operating table, or maybe an emergency room bed. It would sit up and everything was able to be seen. The entity had long tail spikes coming out of its head, and its entire body was that red, veiny look, the same from its face, and it would just look at me. I barely slept for the better part of a month. Eventually my imagination took over with a hospital show that I watched on a regular basis, and then my dreams would incorporate that show with this entity, and eventually it faded off and I was able to sleep. But I could never explain this entire chain of events. I don't know if it was stalking me, like trying to possess me, and it failed. I remember clearly after the incident with my sister and her friends playing with the board a year prior, that my grandma came in and blessed the house with holy water. So maybe it couldn't get that far with me, and it just decided to torment me. And then maybe my brain protected itself, and then it was able to go elsewhere. I could never explain this, and to this day I truly believe that there is some evil entity in that house. And I have not been back there since we moved when I was 14 years old, but a year later we moved. I would love one day, now that it's been like 15 years later, to go investigate this house because I believe that this house is a hub for spiritual activity. And then there's a demonic energy in there as well. Not sure why, how, or for that reason what was in that house, because everything else in there didn't seem to be hostile. That is my story. For anyone who's had a similar experience, I'd love to talk about it. 2. Lately I experienced some strange things. It all started when I was a child, age 6. I was staying over at my grandmother's house for the night when I woke up suddenly. I had to pee really bad, so that's what I did and went back to sleep. In that same room, there was a chair and I felt a real presence, so strong that I couldn't sleep. Eventually I fell asleep like every child would do. Fast forward until I was around 18, I'm 22 at this point. I told my mom about this experience and she started to laugh a little, and told me that my room was her old room. Her father, my biological grandfather, passed away on her 18th birthday since he was an alcoholic, and since that moment she felt that same presence as I did that night, and decided that it was time to move us out. She said that I shouldn't be too scared and that it's something wonderful. Also, she told me that I should welcome any form of communication with his side. Strange to think about it, but a communication from the other side isn't always there with the intention to scare or hurt you. From that moment, some things happened to me that I am grateful happened, because I experienced them as something positive and beautiful. One night I was sitting on the couch watching some TV when suddenly a big bang appeared in the room, and it scared the shit out of me. I look at the floor where the big old Bible fell to the ground from the bookshelf with a peacock feather in between the pages. First of all, that Bible is rock solid and quite heavy, and second of all, it has always been there. I told my mom about it and she told me that Bible was from my past grandpa, and that the feather should be 40 years old as he gave it to my mother when she was young. I was scared at first, but not for too long. Next thing that happened was this strange feeling that I had to go to the cemetery in my hometown to visit his grave, since I have never seen it. I walked in the cemetery not having any idea where to go, so I just decided to figure it out myself, and the next thing you know I found the grave after a minute. Note that the cemetery is freaking huge, and boy was I glad I found the grave. I felt like I was in contact with my grandpa. On the grave was a robin bird. It is believed that robins appear when someone wants to get in contact with you from the other side. I don't know if this is true, but I think it's a cool idea. I asked my dad, my parents are divorced, and he told me about my grandfather since my mom and my grandmother, still alive, won't talk about it. He told me, on the day my grandfather got buried, the second the coffin entered the grave, a loud bang of thunder suddenly appeared. It started to rain after this bang, and the whole cemetery turned cold. Note this was July, where temperatures can reach 25 degrees Celsius where I'm from. And it felt like it was a cold winter day. A sign? Something like a last goodbye. So recently I was having a small fight with my girlfriend, arguing about something not that important. She never believed the things I told her, and said that something like a guardian angel does not exist and stuff. The fight became worse and worse when suddenly the same freaking Bible fell to the ground again, on that same page, and some wooden spoons, cooking accessories, fell to the ground from up high in the kitchen. I still believe this was a sign for him to stop arguing, and after that moment it actually stopped. Long story short, I believe my grandfather is constantly reaching out to me, and guiding me through life as some kind of guard or something. If you experience these strange things like me, please bear in mind it could be something positive and not something that a devil could do. Have a positive mindset toward the paranormal and let it in. 3. This happened when I was probably 8 years old. I didn't really believe in ghosts until this happened. I had this navy blue recliner. It was all mine. If anyone sat in it, I would get frustrated. It was pretty light for being a full-sized recliner. I would push it anywhere in the house I wanted. My parents didn't care if I slept in it or in my bed as long as I went to sleep. Now, the way the back part of my house was built, all the kids' rooms were down the hallway. The first room to the right was my, for at the time, little sister's room. My stuff and bed was in her room because my room was being renovated. The next room to the left was the kids' room. Then my 6 at the time brother's room. Then my room was to the right at the end of the hallway. My brother had a bunk bed in his room, so the night this happened my sister slept on the bottom bunk. I slept in my recliner. I was already scared of my brother's room because my sister and him would watch scary movies in there. Call me what you want, but I was scared. So night rolls around and we are getting ready for bed. Soon we are all asleep. The morning comes and it's about 8 a.m. Everyone else was asleep still. I sat awake listening to the pitter-patter of rain on the metal roof. It was relaxing. I was looking around the room, and my eyes stared into the hallway. I watched the hallway silently. Then I get this eerie feeling, so I pull the covers over my eyes, to the point that I can still see everything, but would have my blanket ready. Good thing I did. This ghostly short woman comes out of the hallway, and is holding a book in one hand, reading it along with a candle in the other. I was paralyzed in fear. I had never been so scared in my life. She continues to float past the doorway and down the hall. I really wanted to get up and see if she was in the hallway still, but I couldn't, and I'm glad that I couldn't. So about half an hour passed by. I was still scared out of my mind, not moving from the room no matter how much I had to use the restroom. I just sat there. About 5 minutes later I get up and put a family-friendly movie on. I can't remember what it was though. Then the movie's about 45 minutes in, and at this point I had to go to the bathroom badly. So I got up and walked as quickly as possible to the bathroom. My parents were awake at this point, in the kitchen talking. I didn't mention the ghost, as when I was in the bathroom my sister woke up and was in the kitchen. I didn't want to scare her, so I waited till she went out to play in the yard. Then I told my parents. At this age my sister could talk. She heard me say ghost and asked what I was talking about. I didn't tell her, but my mom did. Then, as being her 4-year-old self, she claimed she had saw it too. I denied it, as she was still asleep when it happened. She was just trying to get attention, as she still does to this day. As the years passed, I never saw it again. Now we have moved many times, so don't have to worry. Although I have experienced more paranormal stuff over the years, nothing like this, thankfully. I hope I never see it again, or anything worse than it. Thanks for listening. 4. This isn't really a big old scary story or anything, just a small encounter I had. It happened while I was babysitting my cousins for a few days at my aunt's house. The second night I was there, I was awake on the living room couch, just browsing shit on my laptop. All of the lights were off, everyone is asleep. The living room is a sunken one, and through the sliding glass door that leads to the porch, you can see the kitchen bay window a few feet away. The house is shaped like an L, the living room being the bottom half of the L, if you can visualize it. The kitchen stove light was on, so it was a muted glow that I could make out in the dark. I had this sudden feeling, and I really don't know how to describe it. It was like a heart palpitation, but not so frantic. More like a gentler version of it. Like a little reminder. My first instinct was to look from my laptop to the kitchen window. The light in the window was soft, but definitely bright enough to be able to make out someone's face if they were standing there. And someone was standing there. But there was no distinguishable features. It looked like the silhouette of a bald man standing there, turned to face me directly. Just this strange aura of dark in an otherwise brightly lit room. I kept off the couch and ran to the kitchen like an idiot in a horror movie. Something felt off. But no one stood by the sink, nothing was rearranged, nothing. I just figured I hallucinated it or my mind fucked with me. But I was way before the point sleep fucks with your rationality and makes you see things. So whatever, I slept it off. Next night, same thing happened. The feeling tugged at me, this time stronger. Like someone shaking you awake. This time I looked at the doorway that led up to the bathroom and kitchen, at the top of a small set of stairs, and there was a figure. I shut my eyes and opened them. Gone. On the way home from a restaurant, I told my aunt about what happened. Her and my little cousin, who is 10, have both seen the black figure standing in the kitchen window. That night, the bathroom door in the small doorway before you reach the kitchen opened. Very, very slowly. It opened completely. I got up to close it, the entire time telling myself, just a breeze, just a draft, just a something. It slammed shut as I got close, and there had been instances before when I was tired, when I hallucinated curtains slightly opening or doors creaking as I was falling asleep. But while I was scared at those times, I knew it wasn't real. I'm still questioning whether or not I have an active imagination, even with my family members' confirmations, because they're prone to making shit up. Turns out the hill my aunt lives on is the most haunted hill in Washington, or at least one of them. So that's interesting. But maybe after hearing this information, my psyche was set on fucking with me. 5. So growing up, I went to a pretty big, 900 acres, and well-known Boy Scout camp in Ohio. The staff would always tell stories of ghosts and omens in the camp. The camp had a heavy Native American influence. I always thought these were just stories. One summer I worked there and experienced a lot of things for myself. I will share a few stories, but won't write all of them due to the amount unless people want to hear more. A few notes about the camp are, this camp does not have much electricity, with a few exceptions, and the campsite were just canvas tents, an open pavilion, and a latrine. Troops stay there for a full week, and then new troops come for the next week. First story is about a man named Hutch. Hutch was one of the founders of the camp, and I believe was a camp director long ago. It was always told that after taps was played, curfew for the camp, and a scout was out of their campsite, he would walk with them. He would try to direct you in the correct way to get back to your campsite. If you heard footsteps to your left, he'd want you to turn left. If you heard them in front of you, he wanted you to keep going. If you heard them behind you, he wanted you to turn around, and so on. If you heard him walking, it was said that you could say, "It's okay, Hutch, I know my way," and he would leave. Flash forward to when I worked there. The paths in the woods to get back to the staff site were flooded, so myself and 2 other staff walked a main road to get to them. Scouts were not allowed to go near this road for their safety, and they had no reason to. As soon as we reached the road, we started hearing footsteps. At first, they were to our left, which was where the path was. Once we started walking on the road, they were behind us. Not sure if we were just hearing things, we stopped. There were a couple more steps behind us, then they stopped. We continued and tried this a few more times with almost the exact same results every time. Finally, one of the guys I was with stops and says, "It's okay, Hutch, we know our way," and the steps started to walk away. We continued on and didn't hear them for the rest of the time. Second story involves our radios. Only higher-up staff got them, and only one of the 3 female staff members had one. One night, a female voice comes through the radio and is crying and screaming for help. A silent emergency, an emergency only certain staff members know about, was issued, and a head count was performed. The crying and pleas for help keep coming through the radio every few minutes. One staff member goes to the tent the female staff member is in, and discovers her still asleep with her radio sitting on the charger. The emergency was cancelled, and to this day no one can explain it. The final story that I will share involves the omens. One omen is of a white wolf with red eyes that, when seen, means something bad will happen over the course of the summer. The other is a white doe with blue eyes that brings a good summer. During our opening staff week, we were setting up camp and it had gotten late at night. Only a few staff were still out working. One of the last ones comes back, a program director, and joins a few of us sitting by the fire. Everyone says hi, but immediately notice this worried, scared look on his face. When asked about it, he doesn't want to talk, but finally tells us because we were all directors and assistant directors. He tells us that while coming back, he felt an overwhelming cold sensation, and when he turned around, he saw the white wolf standing on the path behind him. We all wondered about what it was warning us about. Everything was good until Scout Week 2 of 7. A few scouts got very sick, but it happened so no one batted an eye about it. The next week, significantly more scouts get sick, and it just keeps getting worse every week. Staff were getting sick, and whole campsites were quarantined. We called in health departments from several counties to help us solve the problem, but no one could figure out why this was happening. They even did soil and water tests all around the camp. I fully believe the white wolf was warning us about it. Edit. Since people want to know more, I will share a few more. The camp was broken down into areas. Each area had several campsites in them, and there were programs based in that area. The areas were named Central Camp, the Peninsula, the Ridge, and the Back 40. One night myself and 2 other staff were doing a patrol after taps to make sure no one was out of their camp. We had just done a sweep of the Central Camp and were in the process of checking the Peninsula. We stopped by the shower house and could hear a woman faintly crying. This was odd because not many of the adults were female. We walked up to the building and called out to make sure everything was okay. The crying stopped, but still no answer. We called out again, but never heard a reply, so we called one of the female staff to go in and check it out. When she gets there, she announces herself and goes in. About a minute later, she comes out and tells us that no one was in there. It was later in the summer, and inspectors from the national organization were coming the next morning to make sure everything was up to par based on national guidelines. All of the directors and assistant directors were out all night making sure all the campsites fit the guidelines. Myself and the 2 staff mentioned above were taking care of the campsites. We had been going around making sure every tent line was marked with an orange ribbon so that people didn't trip over them. We started in the back 40 and worked out through Central, and I got halfway through the peninsula. It was about 3 a.m., so we decided to take a quick break and drink some coffee to warm up. It was raining at the time. We pulled the golf cart into a campsite that wasn't used that week, and so it happens this was right beside the shower house. As we're sitting there, I hear a blood-curdling scream right beside us, and I just hit the gas and took off. The guy sitting beside me is asking what is going on when the guy sitting behind me all of a sudden speaks up in a panicked voice, telling me not to stop and keep driving. We got about a quarter mile before I stopped, and the guy beside me is still confused. When asked, he says he didn't hear anything, but the guy behind me describes exactly what I heard. I have been camping all my life, and I know a lot about animals, and I can say with 100% certainty that what we heard was not an animal. The next one isn't really told much because there is nothing good about it. I am not sure of the whole story of how this came to be, but here is what I do know. In an old staff site on the ridge, there was a Native American-style necklace high in a tree. This was not really visible until someone pointed it out to you. It was said that a demon possessed the necklace and was trapped there as long as it was intact. We had a big storm during the summer, and we were out checking damages. One of the directors that had been there a while saw the downed tree and, upon approaching it, realized the necklace was broke. He came back in a panic, and a few of the veteran staff helped him. They collected every last bead and remade the necklace with the exact same pattern. He then made a lockbox out of wood and put the necklace inside. They took it back to the campsite and buried it several feet underground. I don't know much about the necklace, but I know how scared the people I worked with were, and I know it scares me. We will end on a happier note. There is a section of the camp that is secluded from the rest, and is used for the camp's honors program. This is the only camp in the world that gives this award, and a lot of people come from all over to be part of it. It is called the Pipestone Award. The whole thing is basically one big secret. No one talks about the ceremonies and no one shares their experiences. There are requirements to be able to take part in them. There are swimming requirements, plant, insect, animal, and constellation identification requirements. And everyone has to take part in a good turn project. Once you earn your 5th year, you have earned the highest award. In the past, as a tradition, 5th years have had their pipestone buried in a secret location when they died. In Native American culture, artifacts of the dead are buried nearby so that their soul looks over and protects the living. This is the same idea. We have taken pictures in the area, and have had orbs appear in them as if the 5th years that have passed are still there, watching over and protecting the ceremonies. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 118. Well, we're heading into the weekend now and barreling towards the end of the year. I'll get the weekend videos made, well, I'll probably be making them as you're listening to this, actually, getting things sorted and rounded up. Then on New Year's Eve, I rather annoyingly have a check-up appointment with a dermatologist down at the hospital. I wasn't expecting one, but my skin's pretty much gone back to the way it was, so I do actually need one, so it was well timed. It's just a little annoying they're doing it on New Year's Eve. I didn't really think they'd do much of anything like that then. Ah well, I suppose it's helpful anyway. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.